All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Roundabout Sports, presented by Filthy Games Room, located at 3479 Newtown Boulevard in St. Charles, Missouri, and brought to you by Interstate 70 Sports Media, where our passion is our profession. Thank you so much, folks. It is a cool and breezy Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. I'm the Maestro, Jeremy Carp. Folks, it's the penultimate one. This is episode 99. We are right on the verge of our big 100th episode. And I'm excited. There's a lot of great things in store for us. I know in 2 weeks we got Adrian Chambers. Next week we got Andy Heckroth. But guess what? Tonight we're going to have a dear friend of mine, Michael Langston from KMOX and from the St. Louis Cardinals. So, before we have Michael on, there's a few things in the world of sports I got to cover and get out of the way. Well, before that, be sure to follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on, okay, fine, X. I hate calling it that, but damn it, that's basically what we're at right now. So, follow us on X and on our official YouTube channel, Interstate 70 Sports Media, where you can find all these episodes that are streamed live. And Roundabout Sports has its own Facebook page. Also, be sure to find Roundabout Sports on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Pocket Casts, and more. And if you want to be an advertiser with us, be sure to just shoot me a DM on any of our socials for more details. That said, the Minnesota Vikings in the NFL, they really thought that they had a great player in J.J. McCarthy, which they do. They thought he was going to make his debut this year, which he won't. It was revealed after an injury at practice that J.J. McCarthy actually suffered a meniscus tear, and it's going to require surgery that will end his season before it even began. He had a pretty good preseason debut, but at the end of the day, this is very frustrating news for the young first-round quarterback out of Michigan. Kevin O'Connell's definitely not thrilled about the news, and they didn't know whether it was going to be just an injury that would take a few weeks or if it would take multiple months to take care of. So, point being, J.J. McCarthy has been ruled out for the remainder of the 2024 regular season. Meanwhile, we just have breaking news as the Patriots have agreed to a trade that will send Pro Bowl pass rusher Matthew Judon to the Falcons. The deal will involve a 2025 third-round pick. Also, in the world of the Kansas City Chiefs, now, Hollywood Brown is injured. Chiefs wide receiver Hollywood Brown offseason acquisition, and it's a shoulder/clavicle issue. New offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, Matt Nagy, says he's looking for, believe it or not, of all guys, Justin Watson to step up. Nagy says, quote, I think right now, for where he's at, probably Justin Watson coming in and knowing the role. It's not necessarily step up, but it's different because there are different guys in for different series and quarters. If you have an opportunity, no matter who you are or where you're at, you're trying to make this team. Now, let me tell you something, folks. It may not seem like it. This is definitely a much better Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver group than what it was in the past. I would say it's an improvement over last year because right now you got, as well, you got Rashee Rice, albeit what happens based off the offseason issues. Xavier Worthy, who to me was arguably the top wide receiver next to Marvin Harrison Jr. coming out of college. Sky Moore, McCole Hardman's back with the Chiefs, and Hollywood Brown, who was probably going to be the number one guy. David Owen tuning in. And that's another thing, folks. When we're live, be sure to submit your comments, any questions, whether for me or for our guests, and we'll see what we can get to. But David, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much, man. So thank you for tuning in. That said, Kansas City Chiefs also, they're trying to determine what happened to right tackle Juwan Taylor. He got carted off the practice field today with a leg injury. We are still waiting the official word on everything regarding that. Also, here's an interesting piece. Sports betting will be on the ballot for 2020 or for this November. I know we're not really one to talk politics, but this is an interesting one. So, Missouri is going to be introducing a new bill to make all sports gambling legal for those that are, of course, over the age of 21. Now, the revenue is estimated, as far as tax goes, to be about $30 million a year, and the profits would go straight to upgrading public education. Now, I think that's a fantastic idea right there. This is the reason why I think it needs to be legalized. Look, let's face it, folks. At some point or another, you're going to be going over, and if you're into that type of sports betting, you're going to find a way. You're going to go somewhere. You're going to drive to Casino Queen, or if you live in Kansas City, you're going to drive over to somewhere in Kansas, and you're going to place your bets. It's just how it is. People, I'm pretty sure, do it all the time. And the funny thing is, that's not illegal. That's perfectly fine. Most states around Missouri and in the Midwest have legalized it. Somehow Missouri is definitely that outlier that says, nah, we're not gonna do that. But this is something that's gonna change. Also, Babs, thank you so much for tuning in. Oh, folks, the unsung hero of I-70, absolute pleasure to have you on and tuning in every week. She's got a lot of great projects for I-70 Sports Media coming up your way soon. So be sure to stay tuned to that. With all that said, folks, let's not waste any more time. So for our featured guest this evening, folks, for the 99th episode of Roundabout Sports, he has had quite a career already. And look, he is a professor at Webster University. He's an operator and producer at KMOX Sports. He's a production coordinator with the Cardinals. I'm telling you right now, folks, he is a very dedicated, hardworking man. And it's my pleasure to welcome to Roundabout Sports this evening, the one, the only, Michael Langston.
Hey, Jeremy, what's going on?
Michael, how are you this evening?
We are good. Long days. Got the Cardinal game on in the background, trying to hopefully get a win in this Cincinnati series. Gibby on the mound. I know, you just gave up Oppo Taco before I got up here into the man cave. But, life's going well. I'm glad to be here.
That's fantastic. Well, and it's first off, I want to say it's such a pleasure to have you on and be willing to join us this evening. And first thing I have to ask is we look at where the Cardinals stand as far, trade deadlines passed, all the moves that have probably been made or have been made that are going to be done. Looking at the Cardinals entering today, they were 7.5 back of the Milwaukee Brewers. Do you feel that this Cardinal team is in a position to either compete for the division or for a wild card spot even?
Well, I would certainly hope so. And I think the rest of the front office, we all agree that it, certainly so. Same with KMOX, everybody. It's more fun around the office when a team wins. And that's for every single front office in baseball, no matter where you go. If your team's winning, then it's good vibes all around. So I can only imagine what it's been like to be in Pittsburgh all these years. But with the Cardinals, I'm really I'm hopeful. I like Jordan Walker coming back up. Jordan Walker is a fantastic guy. I've gotten to work with him on a couple different projects that we've had come through creative. And I'm looking forward to seeing how his swing is looking. With Victor Scott, I'm already liking what I see so far with his bat, the way that he's kind of there's been swing breakdowns on how he's not as compact anymore. He's kind of out more with the he's getting ready to get loading easier, essentially, with his hands, with his feet. He's more ready. And that's a comparison that I kind of look at that with that is about 10 years ago, Jose Bautista made a very similar change in his batting stance where instead of being tight, he was out more and more loose coming in, and then it made it easier to get to the ball, get through the ball, decide whether or not he's going to swing. I'm seeing the same thing with Victor Scott. I'm really liking the results that I'm seeing there. It kind of sucks that, it comes at the cost of Michael Ciani being out with his oblique injury, but I'm really hopeful when Ciani comes back. Ciani's also another fantastic guy. A lot of these guys have been able to work with in creative ways and whatnot, because with my job with the Cardinals, with what I do in KMOX, most of the stuff that we do is creative. I'm mainly the audio guy, but to see where the development is, I have trust in Ali. I think Ali knows what he's doing, even though sometimes I know people want to criticize him. I mean, the guy's a baseball lifer, and it's one thing to criticize him from the outside, but I mean, none of us have played professional baseball. So to see what's going on with him and how he's handling the situation, I have full faith and confidence to see how it is. At the end of the day, I hope we do make the playoffs, because if we do make the playoffs, it's a lot more fun. There's a lot more stuff we get to do in my department. There's a lot more stuff we get to do with KMOX that goes into it versus just sitting around in October and watching all these other teams and some other people that we know have fun. We'd like to be the ones to have the fun.
Absolutely. Looking at the Cardinals right now, I mentioned, they traded Tommy Edman before the deadline, but you look at a lot of the other young guys they have on this team. You got Alec Burleson, you got Brendan Donovan, you got Nolan Gorman, you got Newt Barr. You just mentioned two perfect examples in Michael Ciani and Victor Scott. And then, of course, probably the last two I could mention, Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn. Now, to have this core group of young players, how essential is that for the Cardinals as to build for their future?
Oh, it plays into so many aspects. It's not just, in the clubhouse with the fact that you're going to have a lot of guys who when you're young like that, you're hungry, you're eager, you want to prove yourself. You saw that kind of at the end of last year when we knew we were out of the chase and you had all these guys start getting called up. They started playing a lot better baseball. Not necessarily as a team, but individually. You saw Mason Wynn really starting to bloom. You saw Jordan Walker really starting to come into his own. And then you look at the guys who are coming up the pipe in the minor leagues. This is a project that I'm working on too, that I've worked on. It's been a continual project the past 2 years. If you go outside of the ballpark, you'll hear a bunch of highlights playing. It's an 1.5 hour long highlight reel that we put on a loop, and I'm the one who makes it. And we're introducing the new update that's going to come at the end of the season. That one is going to include a new segment, and it's just going to be all of these young guys who are really, really good, that even if they're in our minor league system or up at the majors, different calls to kind of highlight like, hey, the future can be now. We do have some really good guys. I'm really excited for Jerpy, who's down in the minors right now, Max Radget, who has been really good right now. A lot of those guys down in Springfield, Thomas JC, who's in Memphis. Juan Ben Cho's kind of been slowly coming up. I think right now he's in Peoria.
Yes.
But all of those guys, I'm very looking forward to seeing them. I loved what I saw out of McGreevy when he came up. I loved what I saw out of Graceffo when he came up. And I think a lot of us too, when we look at it from what we have to do with our specific jobs in the company, whether it's selling tickets, whether it's creating content, any of that stuff at all, for us, it's exciting to be able to look and see, hey, we have some new faces that we can work with here and create new things within this to help show that, hey, the Cardinals, it might seem like at times that there's no hope, but there always is hope. I mean, it's baseball. There's always tomorrow. There's always the game next, there's the game tomorrow. There's next season. There's next inning. There's next pitch. There's always hope in baseball. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love baseball too, is that you have to have a short memory. You have to go immediately to the next thing. baseball's got a long and storied history. You can remember everything you want about it, but everything could change on the next pitch.
And that's very true. And I think, honestly, Michael, you and I being Cardinal fans and involved in the sports scene as long as we have, look, in St. Louis, they've proven that is absolutely true.
I wouldn't be working for us, if I didn't believe that. I mean, I remember playing on the field at Busch Stadium when I was a senior in high school, and my mom came over to grab me from the gate after we were done, and I'm like, man, I can't believe I just got to play on the field at Busch Stadium. She's like, this is really special. There's like an electricity in this air, and this is not the last time you'll be on this field. And she was right. And there's that electricity. This year was a very special year for me on opening day because I got to be on the field for the Clydesdales. That's the first time I got to be on the field to see the Clydesdales. I used to have to beg my parents to take me out of school on opening day so I could go home and watch it on TV. And now I've been able to see that, and I've been able to meet those guys who made me fall in love with the game of baseball all through this. So it's been incredible, and anywhere else it wouldn't have been this special. Like maybe the Yankees, but like there's nothing like St. Louis Cardinal baseball.
Well, and here's the perfect shot right there, view at right at Busch Stadium, and I guarantee that does not look like you as a senior in high school playing on the field.
No, not at all.
So
that is not baby.
Your mom was absolutely right.
Yes,
it's one of those things. And it's funny because it was I think 2005. I was in 5th grade, and I was selected to sing "God Bless America" with a select few students at the old Busch Stadium. And then just a few years later in 8th grade, I played on the field at Busch Stadium with a middle school band for the national anthem. And, those are just memories I never thought would ever happen in my wildest dreams, but they did. And, you always want to work to achieve higher than those moments. Every time you achieve something great, you want to aspire to do greater. And so this is where I have to. We got a lot of people. We got some goosebumps. We go. John Post.
I'm excited about Weatherholt too. I'm interested to see if we keep him at shortstop or if we decide we want to move him to another position on the infield or maybe into the outfield. With how things have developed, Jordan Walker was supposed to be a third baseman. So who knows? It's all whatever our development guys decide they want to do. It's up to them. But I'm excited for
dear friend Jimmy Harris tuning in from the Independent St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame. A fantastic guy. Thank you, Jimmy. So, we talk about, as far as you go, Michael, I have to ask, where did your original aspiration to be in the position you're in come from?
Well, you got to go way back, Jeremy. I grew up loving baseball. What made me fall in love with baseball, I can think of two very specific moments that made me fall in love with baseball. The first one was the movie The Rookie, starring Dennis Quaid.
Okay.
It was the story of Jim Morris, who was a high school pitcher or a high school teacher who became a pitcher later on. And then I'm going to look this up because I want to make sure I get the specific date on it. But I fell in love with that movie as a really young kid. That was really impressionable on me. And then in 2006, I was a little too young for the 04 and 05 teams. I knew baseball. My dad had taken me to Old Busch. I'd been there. That my first baseball game was Old Busch. It was a game against the Mets. I barely remember that, though. What I remember is 06. Do you remember in 06, we went on a really, really bad losing streak. Middle of the season.
Injuries were taking over the team. X-Time was hurt. Pools were like pitching staff. Like Izzy was hurt, and that's the reason that Wainwright took over his closer role. There was just injuries plaguing the team, and they went on a deep losing streak in the second half of the season.
Yeah, we lost about 8 games coming out of the All-Star break, and then on June 28th was seat cushion night Part 2. Cardinals and at the time the Cleveland Indians. Jake Westbrook on the mound for Cleveland.
Oh, boy.
Going up against Chris Carpenter. We go to the 9th. We're down by 1. Somehow get the tying run home. Winning run is on 3rd in Sotaguchi. Eckstein at the plate. Hits a dribbler to Peralta at short. Johnny Peralta's playing short. Peralta just fumbles the ball. Doesn't set his feet, anything like that. Throws it 10 feet over the first baseman's head. I'm sitting at home as a second grader, and I see seat cushions flying just everywhere, all over the place. And I'm like, oh my God, this baseball thing's awesome. And I watched probably every single game for the rest of the season. We go into the playoffs. We win the World Series. And I'm like, I'm a young, impressionable Cardinals fan. And I'm like, oh, this is going to happen every year. This is definitely going to happen. And then 2007 happens, and we have Adam Kennedy playing second base, hitting behind the pitcher. We have Chris Carpenter getting hurt on opening day 07. But that right there, I always have said for a lot of people, there's one singular moment you can go back to and say, yes, that was the moment that I became a fan of a particular team, of a particular sport. And when I teach this at Webster, a lot of times we do an exercise where I will ask the students, hey, go back to that one moment that you think is the quintessential moment for you that made you become a sports fan or that made you become a fan of this specific team. I knew a lot of kids in my age group grade that were Red Sox fans because of 04. And they were nowhere near Boston. But because of 04, they became a fan. Big Papi hitting the walk-off home run at Fenway. That was their moment.
Yeah, that was huge.
Yeah.
So John was even saying he was at that game and was shocked. You know what? For me, I'll never forget. I mean, look, 29 years old. I remember when it was at the Old Bush, probably when I was 3 or 4 years old, were some of my first games that my parents took me to. I remember, though, the one I truly vividly remember the most as early, there was a Cardinal game, and I believe it was August 22nd, 2004. Larry Walker is up to the plate. Cardinals had just traded for him. And he was huge down the stretch. And I remember bases were loaded, and I told some rando fans next to me, I said, look, and I told my dad too, I said, watch, he's going to hit a grand slam. Boom. Hits a grand slam. And I'm saying to myself, unbelievable. And that was either the last or second to last because he hit grand slam. In fact, there was a streak of 2 grand slams in a row. His last 2 grand slams of his career were consecutive. He had one against the Reds and then the one against the Pirates. I think it was the one against the Pirates.
I just pulled it up. You're right. You're very right.
Yeah.
Because I remember that home run. I do too.
Yeah. So I believe it was the one against the Pirates off Brian Meadows that he had hit. And I remember that stadium going absolutely wild. And, Old Bush Stadium had this feel to it because it was, more of an inclusive stadium, with the cookie cutter design and everything. So the sound really was amplified, but it was fantastic, man. That right there. So I love how you fell in love with baseball and just the memories of kind of what got you. And in St. Louis, it's almost like a rite of passage. Let's face it.
Yes, my dad grew up watching the 64 and 67 Cardinals.
Yep.
So he was one of those people where, he grew up in St. Louis. He could name the entire 64 starting lineup. And the fact that I got to know a couple of those guys from that 64 and 67 team, that's really special. The fact that I've been able to meet a lot of guys from the 82 team, guys from the 06 team, who I can text them and they'll respond. that's all. It just
that is crazy.
I'm looking at the comment here. A home run from Ray Langford from Barbie. Ray's an awesome guy. I've gotten to work with him on some projects as well.
I said, Babs she is such a workhorse and she's such a passionate fan. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and baseball in St. Louis is a definite rite of passage. Everybody grew up in St. Louis listening to Jack Buck and Mike Shannon. If you were a little older, you might have listened to Harry. If you were a little bit younger like me, you might have listened to a little Joel Myers one year. If that's really niche, that's 2002. Wayne Hagan from 03 to 05, and then John Rooney coming on in 06. John Rooney. I love me some John Rooney. John Rooney is the best. So growing up, listening to those guys, being able to work with those guys, it has been terrific. And it truly is Cardinal baseball. I can't think of anything more quintessentially St. Louis than sitting in the Ted Drew's parking lot, hot summer night. You turn the radio up, put the windows down. You got custard. I get a tiramisu. You got the custard with you, and you're listening to them call a baseball game. There's nothing more St. Louis than that, except maybe someone's playing Nelly in the background. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. You mentioned Mike Shannon, and God rest his soul, one of the greatest to ever do it. Absolutely, he was, because this is the thing. This is a guy that, he started, obviously, he's a World Series champion ball player with the Cardinals. But the thing of it is, from 1962 to 2021, this man was somehow involved in the Cardinals organization, whether it be as a player or as a broadcaster. Now, you told me that you had the pleasure of working with Mike Shannon in the last 3 years of his broadcasting career. I have to ask, so there's kind of a two-parter. So the first part of the question is, how did that come about? And the second part is kind of a cliched question, but it's got to be asked. What was that like?
So, yeah. I don't even know where to begin with Mike. So there is a position that was started with the Cardinals. It's still around today. Jeremy, I don't know if you've heard of him. His name's Ethan Hannaford. He's the guy who currently has it. He took over for me. That position was started in the 80s. It's called the radio booth assistant. And that started because of Jack Buck when Jack was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And that person was to help Jack as in his later years get through everything. And they also helped Mike. They helped Joe when Joe Buck was starting out. And then once Jack passed away, they were going to get rid of the position, but Mike stepped in and said, "No, I want to keep a booth assistant around. I think it's good. I would use someone like that to help me through these games." Because Mike was a very social butterfly. He would bring people into the booth all the time, corporate sponsors, stuff like that. It was someone to help, because people forget that year between when Mike got diagnosed with his kidney ailment and he had to retire from baseball and when he went into the booth for a season, he was in marketing. And so Mike really understood that at the end of the day, baseball is a business and we need to sell the Cardinals in some way, shape, or form. That was his mentality. That was his philosophy. And John Rooney says it best. He said it on air. He said it in interviews. There is nobody who sold more Cardinals tickets and sold more ice-cold Budweisers in their life than Mike Shannon.
Or Fast Eddie's shrimp.
Or Fast Eddie's. I love Eddie. Eddie, if you're watching this, Eddie Scholler, you're the man. I love Eddie. I got Eddie stories, but no, Eddie's a good dude. I love Eddie. But anyway, so Mike, he understood that. So the booth assistant was there to help him do the broadcast in addition to doing all these other things, as well as different personal needs that Mike needed and whatnot. And it evolved over the years. A guy by the name of Phil Hunt had the position back in the 04 run. I got to meet him. He used to be a basketball coach over there at Harris Stowe. and he played basketball at SLU. Another guy who I work with now with the Cardinals was booth assistant for a while. Some of Mike Shannon's people that he brought on full time to help him in the restaurant business have been booth assistants. There's been a lot of different people. It's a long lineage. I am lucky enough that I was in the booth for 4 years, which is tied for the longest amount of time to be in the radio booth. Myself and a guy from the 90s who I know really well now. And 3 of those 4 years were with Mike, and 2 of those 3 were during COVID. And so when I started in 2019, and I was with the team and helping Mike 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. In 2022, that's when I got promoted into the role that I have now. So with Mike, when I first applied for it, my mom basically just told me, "Hey, you need to get a summer job." That was it. Like, I know it's literally that simple. Mom just said, "Hey, Michael, you need to go get a summer job." I was a sophomore in college. I was a semester ahead, so technically I was a junior first semester, and mom just said, "Go get a summer job." We had a friend who worked at the Cardinals. She sent us a couple links of different positions, and I went and applied for it. I took my glasses off in the interview because I didn't want to look like a nerd, and I thought I was the underdog because I'm a poli-sci major. My bachelor's and master's are in politics. They're not in sports. Yeah, so I got this. So when you say you don't want to get into politics, I will gladly get into politics. That's how it came about. And I thought for sure I was the clear underdog, but I guess what set me apart, I came from a radio family. My dad was on WIL for 25 years, country station in St. Louis. My mom was the promotions director. So I kind of grew up in understanding that radio feel, and it made the transition getting into the booth with Mike a lot easier. And the guy who trained me was a guy by the name of Andy Painter. Andy had been the booth assistant back when the Cardinals were good in early 2010s, and then we had that stretch from 16 to 18 where we couldn't get above 500 to save our lives.
Right.
And he gave me some really good advice, which was just put your head down until August, and then come up for air after that, and you'll see where you stand. Because it was really a year-by-year thing. If they didn't like you after year 1, you're done. You didn't get a second year. And I put my head down. I came up for air in August. I looked around, and I realized, I guess they like me. And I really like them. And I really started to grow those relationships with Mike Shannon. Working with him, I would do a scorecard every day, get him prepped for a game. Working with John Rooney, Mike Claiborne, Jim Jackson, Ricky Horton. And then when COVID hit, there was a lot more. And I know I'm rambling, and you probably have another question. But
you're good.
Yeah, we got into COVID, and then with COVID, we didn't have as much staff on site. So I needed to help support our TV crew and our Spanish crew. So I started working a lot more heavily with, at the time, Danny Mac, Jim Edmonds, Brad Thompson, Rick Ankiel, Tim McCarver, who Tim McCarver was just a sweetheart.
I was about to say, what was it like working alongside with Tim McCarver?
He stole my notepad. I don't know where it went. He stole my notepad. Back when we used to do the live at Shannon's, which I was there for the last show when we taped it. We used to do that. We would do it after the game in the booth on Friday nights, and then it got moved to pre-recording taping of it on Friday night, like Friday afternoons before the game would start. And once they had McCarver in one time, we were playing the Phillies, and McCarver always did the Phillies because he played for them. And he took my notepad. I had a notepad, and I had like some actually really important notes that I had written down, and he just went over, swiped it, and walked away. And that was the last game McCarver worked that series and that season. So I was like, Tim, I don't know where my notepad is. And I didn't see him again because COVID, he didn't really work a lot. So I didn't really see him for like 2 years after that. And I still don't know where my notepad went.
I was about to say, did you ever get your notepad back?
No, I never did. I thought it was funny. At the end, I got to talk to Tim before he passed, and his grandson Bo was with him, and they were just incredibly nice. We were able to get Tim on Hall of Fame weekend. We were able to get Tim from the alumni suite and bring him to the radio booth and do a really good in-depth interview. By that point, he was pretty much done doing TV. That meant a lot. And that was really cool to be able to see Tim again. I love Tim. You know, the guys that we lost, it hurts, with Mike especially. That one hurt a lot. Tim hurt a lot. Losing Bruce Sutter definitely hurt. See these guys. I remember when we got the news that Bob Gibson passed and Lou Brock, and
that was a rough stretch.
When I'll tell you, Mike was a very big, boisterous person. Every time Mike Shannon walked into the room, you knew he was there. Every single time, even post-COVID, because it's true, he had COVID. Like Rick Hummel, Commish, another person who's passed on, who I loved Commish. Rick Hummel was the best sports writer that they had up there. He was the best. When Hummel wrote his article on it, I was like, is this going to affect anything? And Mike, you could tell an elderly person getting COVID is going to affect them no matter what.
Yeah.
It affected, I remember getting COVID, and it affected me, and I'm 25. So it hurt my heart to see how Mike reacted when his teammates Bob and Lou had passed. That, like, to see how deeply affected he was that his friends had passed away. That, I mean, those hurt. When Lou passed, that hurt. And these just absolute legends. I remember being at the funeral, at Mike's funeral, and
oh man,
having to hold back tears. Mike was he meant that much to me growing up. He helped shape my identity as a Cardinal fan. I know he helped shape the identities of millions of other Cardinal fans. I mean, the largest radio network in baseball, in professional sports, with 139 stations on it. That there's power behind that, and Mike knew exactly that how much he meant to Cardinal baseball, and that when you know how much you mean to the game and how much you mean to the fans, like Mike, like Lou, like Tim, like all these guys, and then you lose as a fan. When you lose that, not just as someone who knew them, but as a fan, it hurts. It sucks. And not to bring it down, but so I'll bring it right back up. Mike was one of the most generous people I've ever met. One of the most. I have a ball. It's over there that he signed and it's him, and it's all the broadcasters I've ever worked with.
Oh,
so
wow.
That ball has Mike, Danny Mac, Chip Carey, Jim Edmonds, Rick Ankiel, Brad Thompson, Tim McCarver, Al Rabosky, Polo Asensio, the fantastic voice of Los Cardinals, Benji Molina, Mike Claiborne, John Rooney signed it, Ricky Horton signed it, Alexa Dat, Jim Hayes.
Wow.
So
wow, that is crazy. So before we continue, I have to do a quick little promotional sponsor, because we have such a wonderful sponsor for our show here. First off, I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in so far to Roundabout Sports. I'm the Maestro Jeremy Carp, alongside my guest, my dear friend Michael Langston from KMOX Sports and the St. Louis Cardinals. I want to talk for a second about Filthy Games Room, folks. That's right, Filthy Games Room, 3479 Newtown Boulevard in St. Charles, Missouri. Now, it has one of the largest collections of retro and modern video games in the St. Louis metropolitan area. Thousands of games and consoles, sealed, retro, old, and new, ranging from all the way back to the Atari 2600, hell, going all the way back to the Magnavox Odyssey, and all the way up to the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and the Nintendo Switch. They're a frequent attendee of conventions and trade sales, so definitely be sure to check them out. Store is open from 12 to 8, Wednesday through Saturday. That is Filthy Games Room at 3479 Newtown Boulevard. Michael, I want to, you know, you're talking about a lot of these legends, and yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting Lou Brock when I actually got an autographed baseball in person from him. So to be able to get to meet him and get an autograph from him just absolutely blew my mind that happened. I wanted to ask you about Whitey Herzog. Now we know he passed away this year, briefly after, not too long after opening day. How much did it mean to you and everybody else that you know to have Whitey be able to attend opening day?
You saw me smile when you mentioned Whitey's name. And anytime I've ever heard Whitey mentioned, there's a smile with it. Everyone has a Whitey story. I got the chance to read his book that he wrote called You're Missing a Great Game. And it taught me so much about the game of baseball, but it also taught me about that Whitey ball era, the 1980s Cardinals, and how incredible that team was. And I've gotten to be able to meet and talk with a lot of those guys as well. Ozzie Smith comes into the office a lot. Ozzie Smith's the host of our TV show that we have, and getting to know Ozzie has been awesome. Being on a couple shoots with Ozzie is incredible. Guys like Dave LaPointe, Ricky Horton played for Whitey Ball. All these incredible players from that era of Whitey Ball. And even a little later, bleeding into the 90s when it was Joe Torre that kind of took over. But when you look at Whitey as a person, Whitey, even at 90, was the most bashful man you could ever imagine. Like, you look at that picture of Whitey right now that's on the screen, and you look at that face, and even though that face had a couple more wrinkles, the hair was all white, he was walking around with his trademark cane that looked like a baseball bat. It was the same Whitey. I mean, it's the same person. The voice sounded a little more gravelly, but it was the same guy. And some of my favorite memories of Whitey. So for fantasy camps, which if you're at all interested, cardinals.com/fantasy camp, we have a bunch of alumni who come. We either go to this next year, we're going to Walt Disney World. We go to Cooperstown. We played here in St. Louis. You get to play on a team with these legends, with these former Cardinals, guys like David Eckstein, guys like Scott Spezio, all these. Ozzie Smith is there too. And Whitey was always there. Whitey never missed a fantasy camp. And I remember he would come into the banquets that we would host. There were two banquets, an opening and a closing banquet. And I would have to be there really early to help set up the audio and the microphones and whatnot. And I would go in, and Whitey would just sit down in the front row, and he didn't care if you were listening or not. He'd just start telling stories. Just like he would just start telling you about, I remember this guy, he couldn't hit. Or, talking about just a random bench player from when he was with the Senators. One of my favorite stories is when he played in Washington for the Senators back in the early 60s, he remembered where the president, because the president used to throw out the first pitch from the stands. He remembered where the president would throw the ball and every year position himself right there because he knew, I think it was President Kennedy, would throw it to the exact same spot every time and he'd catch the ball from President Kennedy. Like stuff like that. He would just regurgitate anything. And it was incredible to sit there and talk to him, sit there and listen to him. He was undoubtedly the biggest part of Cardinal baseball for a generation. I was just talking to Kerry Robinson the other day. And for you guys that know, K-Rob came up in the early 2000s. He's a St. Louis kid, had a big home run against the Cubs, had a great playoffs for us, but he grew up in the 80s. And he told me, like, that era of Cardinal baseball is what made me love baseball in the first place. That the fact that means so much to so many people. My dad tells a story all the time in 82 when we win the World Series. he drove downtown in his VW bus and just saw the elation. And he said he's never seen anything like it ever again of us winning the World Series in 82. That 82 to 85 team, in 87 as well, the heat is on. Those teams, that was special, and that was Whitey. Whitey knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't afraid to make the trades. And if you're a Cardinal fan and you know niche Cardinal knowledge, you know that we had Raleigh fingers for a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was involved in a trade with the Brewers for Dave LaPointe. Yeah, big trade. You send Vukovich, Simmons, and Fingers to the Brewers, and in return you get Dave LaPointe, who's one of the most crucial arms in your 82 team, and gets you the victory in 82. Without Dave LaPointe, you don't win the World Series in 82. Without Willie McGee, without the trade that you make with San Diego to get Ozzie Smith. And Whitey talked about that back because when he first came onto the Cardinals, he was both general manager and he was manager. And Whitey said that I needed to do everything I could to make this team better. And I knew the style of baseball I wanted to play, and I knew the people I needed to play that style of baseball. And I went out and got them. So that's why that very famous 82 team where you had Oberkfell, Keith Hernandez, Tommy Herr, you had Coleman came a little bit later, but you had Silent George, you had Ozzie, you had Darryl Porter behind the plate, the pitching that you had, Joaquin Andujar. Darryl Porter winning the MVP was fantastic, but also Willie McGee in that World Series, what he did in Milwaukee, defensively and offensively.
Let me tell you something I already know my dad, who is watching this, is probably typing up a comment right now talking about Willie McGee robbing the Brewers of a home run in Game 3 of the 82 World Series. I already know. We've seen that play so many times. We've talked about it so many times. I already know it's coming. I mean, he already said that Whitey Ball was the most exciting teams in his life, and he is 64 years old. So I already know. I just had to say it because, look, that World Series, so many memorable moments happened, and, it was so back and forth.
Yes. People that is lost on history too. That 82 series, we went into Game 7 not knowing what was going to happen. Like when it came to 67, when the Cardinals beat the Red Sox in Boston, you've got Gibson on the mound. He's 2-0 already, and he's hitting the hell out of the ball at the plate.
Yeah.
You knew it was over. Like the Red Sox knew it was over. You go into 2011, Game 7, like the Rangers threatened early, but you knew that game was done.
Yeah, because the night before, it was it. You knew if they couldn't win. It's one of those things, and I've talked to my friends about this when it comes to like the Super Bowl. When it comes to one of those instances where you go all in on 1 year and on one title. If you don't get it then, you're not getting it. That was the Rangers in 2011 for that season. It was, If we don't win the Game 6, there ain't no way you're winning Game 7. All the energy was sucked out of them.
Yes, and I can only think, because a part of what I do with the team is archiving, going through, finding different things for whether it be a movie reaches out and says, hey, we're getting ready to shoot, but we're wanting some Jack Buck calls. Can you help? Helping, if we're putting together different projects with the highlight reel that plays outside. I actually have a picture of what this thing looks like right now in its raw form of just trying to put it together. That's what my That's what my audition looks like right now, of all these clips. And in there is the calls somewhere of Willie robbing those home runs. All of them. And you go into 82, Game 7. There's only one other Game 7 where it wasn't like guaranteed that the Cardinals were probably going to win that Game 7. And it's 1926, the first time that we do it. And that's, you have to call on Grover Cleveland Alexander to come in, hungover, by the way, to set down the Yankees and win the World Series. But in 82,
Babe Ruth getting picked off.
Babe Ruth's stolen base.
ended the world's. That is to date the last time a pickoff, or I guess a throwout, whatever you want to say, ends a World Series. Like not a game, but a World Series. They won the World Series because they threw out Babe Ruth trying to steal second. Which is the craziest scenario I can think of. Like, hey, how did you win the World Series? Babe Ruth tried to steal base. We threw him out. No big deal. Nothing.
The hot dog beer drinking guy tried to steal second base, and Rogers tagged him out.
Right. So exactly the guy that heavily drank, chewed tobacco, ate so unhealthy, trying to steal second, tagged out by the guy that the players, his teammates couldn't stand.
Oh, they hated him.
Yeah, had a huge gambling problem.
He wouldn't go to the movies because he thought it would hurt his eyes.
And wouldn't exactly. It was a big stick in the mud. So you take all of that, and that's what the sequence that ends the World Series.
It makes no sense. And the guy on the mound is hungover from the night before.
Yeah, that one really does crack me up. I got another one. This is the interesting thing. You want to talk about a World Series that could have. 68 is a heartbreaker because look, Mickey Lolich to this day tells people, hey, I bested Bob Gibson in the World Series. I mean, it's a heartbreaking instance, that Kurt Flood misplaying the ball. But it's not the sole reason. Look, say what you want, that 68 season is the greatest pitching season of all time.
Yes.
Nobody will ever beat Bob Gibson's 68 season. They changed the rules because of that.
Yes. It's insane. And I have a Shannon story actually about 68. Okay. I had to sit down and do a story for my college paper on just like a profile piece, and I was like, Mike, would you mind telling me about facing Lolich in 68? He gave me about 10 minutes just straight talking. 68, Maris is right at the end of his career. He just won the World Series in 67 with the team. He's the primary right fielder. They go out and they get a new arm, or a new bat, right fielder. And he's a right-handed hitter. He gets injured in game 1 against Lolich. And they weren't going to put Maris in because Maris couldn't hit left-handed hitting.
Right.
So they end up having to put Maris in, and that's a guaranteed out. Because Maris, at that point, Maris can't hit a lefty. And if you ask Shannon, if you asked him about it, he would tell you, Kurt didn't lose us that series. It was, we couldn't hit Lolich. And they were so pissed that they couldn't hit Lolich because, honestly, they looked at him and they said, we have a better lineup than this. We have a really good lineup. At that point, Cepeda's there. Julian Javier is there. Shannon's at third. Kurt Flood is there. Lou is playing.
It's one of the greatest lineups.
They're deep. Deep. I don't think Aparicio was there at that time.
So you take a look at the Cardinals main starting roster that year. I know you had McCarver starting at catcher. You had Cepeda, Javier, Dal Maxville, Shannon, Brock, Flood, and Maris. Those were your starters. But then you look at your bench. You got Bobby Tolan, Johnny Edwards, Gagliano, Dick Schofield, Ed Spezio. This, like you said, this was a deep team.
And it was the debut, I think, of Ted Simmons and Steve Carlton.
Yep, and they won 97 games that year. One thing I've learned about the Cardinals is when they dominate, unless it's the 40s, when they dominate their way, they find a way to get upset. When they sneak in, that's when they win it. 06 and 2011, there was no reason that the Cardinals should have won those World Series. But in 2004, In 2005, the fact that the World Series did not go to the St. Louis Cardinals blows my mind. But in their defense, I'm going to say it. At the time of the 2004 World Series, there was not a team in professional sports on a bigger hot streak than the Boston Red Sox.
Nobody would have beat Boston. I wanted to spell that right now. Throw the Astros in there with their pitching core.
Astros would have. It would have been even worse and that's saying something because the Cardinals won 105 games and got swept, but the Astros would have been worse.
It would have been a slaughter.
Yeah, because if the big reason that the Cardinals lost that series, besides the momentum and everything in Boston, was the lack of hitting. Edmonds, Pujols, and Roland could not hit any of the pitching. They could
Roland's home run in 06 in game 1 broke an 0 for 27 that he had in the World Series.
Exactly.
He didn't get one hit in the entire
The only guy that hit, I think, over 250 in the World Series for the Cardinals was Larry Walker.
Yes.
Like, everybody else, I swear, if I remember correctly, Pujols, Roland, and Edmonds went for a combined average of about 179, which is unbelievable to think about in the grand scheme of everything, you know?
And those guys are such savants at it too. Getting to talk with Edmonds about hitting, the guy it just comes out. I've never met anyone who knew more about the science and art of hitting than Jim Edmonds. And you saw that. I think one of the greatest Cardinal moments of all time is Edmonds' walk-off home run in the NFC.
I knew it. I knew you were going there. It's one of my favorites. It is top. I'll go top 5 if I have to, because guess what? That moment, my parents and I, Dana, we were all watching that game when that happened. And I'm telling you right now, the amount of goosebumps and chills I get when I go on YouTube just to rewatch it. Like, I know what's going to happen. I've seen it 1,000 times. But the swing, like I said, maybe it's left hand. I mean, I'm a lefty, but I bat right. But I'm telling you, left-handers seem to have the best swings.
That was
the form, the swing was perfection. And I mean, just the whole atmosphere, Tom Brenneman's call. And then
if you even listen to the radio one, Wayne Hagen had a terrific
Wayne Hagen's call on the radio. You could even argue is better, and how electric it was. Mike Shannon's ecstatic about it. So no, it was beautiful. Say what people will say what they want about Edmonds as a commentator. I'll say this. There is no reason he should have been one and done on the Cooperstown ballot. There is no reason.
Defensively, one of the best center fielders of all time. If you haven't seen the highlight of him robbing a home run in Cincinnati, come on.
Yep.
He robs LaRue going 10 feet over the wall. And one and done, the defensive metrics are there. There's a lot of guys in baseball who are like that. Just in the history of the game, Bobby Grish also comes to mind. These are great players. I'm in favor of a big haul. And I'll tell you how awesome it was to have Scott Rowland go in the Hall of Fame. When we had Scott go in, and the incredible work that our alumni people do with the Cardinals, Joe Pfeiffer and Larry State are two of the best people because we have the largest alumni network in baseball. Look at that. And
what?
You're telling me that doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame?
He dug down there. He didn't even, and it wasn't even a trap. That's the thing. He didn't trap it. He had caught it all the way down there before it hits.
A guy with 8 Gold Gloves, a 60 B WAR for his career doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame? What is wrong with This is why I never understood any of that, and why I was so glad it felt vindicated when Scott Rowland got to go in the Hall of Fame. The incredible, that 04 team starting to really get recognized. We know Pujols is a guaranteed Hall of Famer. We know Yachty's going in the Hall of Fame. I hope Adam Wainwright goes in the Hall of Fame. I would assume 200 wins would cement that. Plus, what he's done in the community. Adam Wainwright is one of the nicest people I think I've ever had the pleasure to meet. But yeah, it is a crime that Jimmy Ballgame is not in the Hall of Fame. And I have said that to him. And it's, it sucks that he's not, and he needs to be. There are several, it's not just Cardinals. There are several players in general who need to be in the Hall of Fame, and Jim Edmonds is one of them.
Absolutely. Michael, I know there's so much we have to talk about, but honestly, we reached a point where we got to wrap things up this evening. But before, and look, I'd love to have you on again if you're down for that.
Yeah. Tell me a day. We'll figure it out.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, let people know where they can find your amazing work.
Well, if you listen to the Cardinal Radio Network, you've probably heard my voice, either this natural voice or you've heard me doing a silly voice like the Sorting Hat from Harry Potter in our latest Harry Potter Night radio spots. Check out the Cardinal Radio Network. You can hear all of my work that I do in the commercial breaks. Also give a listen to John Rooney and Rick Horton. Those two are some of the best in the business. Mike Claiborne as well, and Jim Jackson turning all the knobs and levers. Anytime you go to a Cardinal game, you can hear my work playing outside the ballpark, that big old highlight reel I told you about before. That's all right there. Tune into KMOX. I produce and board op over there. It's a great time to be able to go over there and play radio a little bit. And anytime we didn't even get to talk about my work with Battlehawks, my work with City SC, all that kind of stuff. But if you ever want to listen in and hear some of the other work that I've done, I do the Turkey Day football game between Webster Groves High School and Kirkwood. That's going to be on KXOK 102.9 FM and KWRH 92.9 FM. And if you want to follow me on social media, you can. If you don't, I don't really care. I'm not in for the follows. I'm in it for a good time. And I'm here. I just love talking about sports, and I love talking about working in it and all the cool stuff.
All righty. Now, folks, as we wrap it up here on Roundabout Sports, as always, we want you to know that you can call the NAMI helpline at 1-800-950-NAMI. That's 1-800-950-NAMI. The National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's the largest nonprofit organization dedicated to building better lives for those who struggle with mental health issues. And also, we put up the Suicide in Crisis Lifeline. And for that, you dial 988. The line is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 366 on leap years. Understand that you're never alone in this world. There is always somebody out there who loves you, that cares about you. Your mental health and your safety matters. And it's never selfish to think about yourself, and understand that there is always somebody there who is there to help you. You're just a phone call, a text message away. And you could also be the listening ears and watch eyes for somebody else in need. So I want to thank my dear friend Michael Langston for being on this evening. Join us next week, folks, for a big episode 100. Hollywood James Knox and I will be welcoming Andy Heckroth on the show. I absolutely look forward to it. And as always, life is a book full of empty pages just waiting to be written in. Make your lives worth reading.